program is for educational purposes only. The content is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, nor is it intended to take the place of your primary care physician. The statements in this program have not been evaluated by the FDA. Testimonials are shared as individual experiences of the individual. Results vary and may not be typical. We do not make any claims regarding health or income. As an empowered individual, you do have options available. We are honored to continue to share the teachings of a founding father of the science of epigenetics, Dr. Joel Wallach, Bachelor of Science in Plant and Soil Sciences, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, 4 postdoctorates in pathology, naturopathic doctor. This program is for educational purposes only. The content is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, nor is it intended to take the place of your primary care physician. The statements in this program have not been evaluated by the FDA. Testimonials are shared as individual experiences of the individual. Results vary and may not be typical. We do not make any claims regarding health or income. As an empowered individual, you do have options available. We are honored to continue to share the teachings of a founding father of the science of epigenetics, Dr. Joel Wallach, Bachelor of Science in Plant and Soil Sciences, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, 4 postdoctorates in pathology, naturopathic doctor. This program is for educational purposes only. The content is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, nor is it intended to take the place of your primary care physician. The statements in this program have not been evaluated by the FDA. Testimonials are shared as individual experiences of the individual. Results vary and may not be typical. We do not make any claims regarding health or income. As an empowered individual, you do have options available. We are honored to continue to share the teachings of a founding father of the science of epigenetics, Dr. Joel Wallach, Bachelor of Science in Plant and Soil Sciences, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, 4 postdoctorates in pathology, naturopathic doctor.
Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to Daily with Doc and Becca. My name is Ruth Ellen Sanchez and I will be your host for today. We want to give a big shout out to Rebecca Dukes, who is out visiting with her family and helping with some situations there and loving on her family. That's what she's doing. So we love you, Rebecca. Also, this program is for educational purposes only and is not meant to treat, diagnose, or cure any diseases, nor is it intended to replace the care of your primary physician. The statements in this program have been evaluated by the FDA. Testimonials are shared as individual experiences of the individual. Results may vary and may not be typical. We do not make claims for income or health. And as an empowered individual, you do have options available. I am so excited today that we have Dr. Judy Reynolds, and she is going to talk about a topic that we all find near and dear to our heart, epigenetics. And I can't wait to hear what she has to say and all of the questions that people are going to ask and different things. So Dr. Judy is here, and she is a renowned expert in animal nutrition with a PhD specializing in nutrition, while her focus has been on our equine friends. Her deep understanding of animal physiology and the importance of proper nutrition offers a valuable insight that can be applied to human health as well. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Dr. Judy on the screen with me, and welcome, 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 Dr. Judy. I am very excited about today, if you can't tell.
Thank you.
You're
I'm
welcome.
very glad to be here. As usual, we have a lot of fun.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So, you're going to talk about epigenetics. I'm very excited. And I think you had questions for everybody.
Well, I thought today, just for fun, maybe we'd start, and anybody who wants to, I would like to have you just give me a real quick definition of what you think epigenetics is, and there's no right or wrong answer. One of the very successful teaching methods, I believe, and that I've used a lot, is kind of asking or trying to find out what your people are thinking about or what their knowledge is on a topic before you start. And that way it helps you decide what you want to spend your time on and how you want to teach it. And then afterwards, you can kind of summarize and see if people have changed their mind, learned something like that. So if anybody in the group there or anybody online would like to just say, well, I've heard of epigenetics, but here's what I think it means. And let's just pull some of those definitions together. And then I'll go ahead and I've got a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, excellent. We're going to start with AJ.
I'd like to give the first wrong answer of the day, and that will be epigenetics is how lifestyle and environmental factors, toxins and nutrition, etc., can affect DNA, but does not change the underlying DNA itself.
Okay, excellent. And here's what we're going to find. I've got some definitions that I'm going to pull up too, and they're different.
Was that right?
Well, there's no right or wrong because there are different ways to do it. Let me jump in here now because you brought up a great point. And Dr. Wallach, that's in his definition in his book. Okay, not doing something but not affecting the actual sequence of the DNA. And that's what you're saying. You're saying environmental effects that do not affect the actual genetic sequence of the DNA. And that is one way to look at it. Okay? It's not wrong.
But we're about to hear a better answer, I see.
No, not necessarily. Okay, anybody else want to jump in? Because when we have to think about it ahead of time, sometimes it helps us to really start thinking about it. If we have to actually, if nobody wants to answer, that's fine.
There are plenty of answers in the chat.
Yeah, let's have a few from the chat. That'd be great.
All right. So Sherry Browning says how behaviors and environment can change the way your genes work. And then Keeley says death of genetic theory. And then Marilyn says, are you just giving a definition there, Marilyn? Okay. Let me see. Is there anybody else?
Yeah, I just gave Dr. Wallach's definition, and then I put down on the bottom what AJ just said or what Dr. Judy just said.
Okay. All right. Perfect. AJ, did you have something else to say?
No, that's still a hand. I'm sorry.
Okay. And then Albert, let's bring you on and you can say what you
Hi,
think.
Dr. Judy.
Hi.
So my thought around it is pretty direct, and what I understand the way Dr. Wallach explained it each time, and that it's got simply nothing to do with what we know as genetics. So your eye color, your hair color, your height, your width, and all of that is genetics. But Dr. Wallach explained it very clearly that it is the reason is because of the diets we eat. It's a nutritional deficiency that has caused all these problems in our lives, and it's not carried over from one family to another when you've got a heart disease or a liver disease and all of that sort of thing. It's purely because of our diets that we have these problems in our lives. And that's the direct way that I understand it.
And that's an excellent summary of what Dr. Wallach has been teaching us this whole time. So, I mean, anybody else want to jump in? You'll know why I'm doing this in a minute. Anybody else want to jump in?
My answers is pretty close to what AJ and Albert said. So is there anybody else? All right. So
okay. If you don't want to pull anybody else in, let me just give you a reason why I think this kind of varies. And I'm going to bring other authors in, not just Dr. Wallach. Okay. To go from our genes, we all know that we have genes. And in order for that genetic material, that blueprint, to go on to our offspring, those genes have to, the helix has to open up, and then we have to have messenger RNA, and then the messenger RNA will go in, and proteins will actually be created according to that map or that blueprint. So we have the genes themselves. They have to be able to duplicate themselves because they're in every cell virtually. I mean, we have red blood cells and things that don't have them. But the DNA have to be able to replicate themselves through all the cells. And there can be mistakes in that. Does everybody kind of agree with that? We can have mistakes in our cells. Okay, so that's one place there can be mistakes. Then when we make the messenger RNA, there can be mistakes going from the DNA to the messenger RNA, right? And then from the messenger RNA to go to the proteins, the actual proteins themselves. That can be a mistake. So when I think about epigenetics, and again, I'm not right, I'm just the way I'm thinking about it, there can be mistakes where the genes are incorrect. There's a mistake in the gene going from one cell to another. There can be a mistake in the messenger RNA, and there can be a mistake in the protein. And how many proteins do we have? Right? Trillions of them. Yeah, I mean, we have trillions of cells. We have all these different. So all of these things, in all these places, there can be mistakes. So if we do the literal definition, like pretty much all of you guys, and actually myself in a way, where we don't change the DNA, but something downstream changed, and we have a protein that doesn't work, or an enzyme, or, you know, a vital part of the body that doesn't work correctly. And then we're talking about how that epi means above or outside of genetics, right? So those other things can happen. But there's also the possibility, like I said, that the gene itself can have a problem. And when you're doing that, and when I made a comment the last time I was on, and AJ and I were talking back and forth, and I made the comment, we can use nutrition to work around a genetic defect. And the reason I phrased it that way is because with my own PhD research, there was a genetic defect that actually affected the muscle cell membranes of horses. And because of that defect, there was a protein created, and those horses had a bunch of metabolic problems. And what I actually did, because it was my research, designed a way to use nutrition to keep those horses alive, even though they had defective proteins because of a defective gene in one stallion. Okay? But most of the time, when we think of something like methylation, we think about people are not able to manage the normal B vitamins without that last step, and it's just adding methyl groups on. And most people believe that what that does is turn genes on or off. That was the common way that people looked at it before, because a gene would either be on or off. Now it's gotten a lot more complicated than that. So, you know, I'm not sure that we can just say on and off, but things are affected by it. Okay. So any questions about that or comments about that? And then I'm going to go ahead and just start through my slides. Anybody? I'll see if I can.
I do not see any. Let me check Facebook and Rumble and YouTube. No questions or comments yet. We're good.
Okay. All right. So everybody's confused already. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. So what is epigenetics? All right. We talked about it. Let's see if I can get that slide to go. There we go. Okay. The term epi means above, and genetics is the study of genes and heredity. So we kind of know that. We've all had some kind of in school, one where place or another, we've had we've learned something about genetics, study of genes and heredity. Okay. All of you brought in the environmental and specifically nutrient effects on genes, because again, you're right. This is a huge thing. This is what Dr. Wallach discovered, because if genes just determined everything, which a lot of people have always thought, if genes determined everything, then we have no way to improve. We have no way to help ourselves, and we are literally stuck, which is not a fun thing to believe. As a person interested in nutrition my whole life, I don't know if I ever really believed that the genes were in control of everything. I would have to think back a bunch, but for a long time, I have understood how nutrition can affect things. So that's how it goes for me. Now, a lot of you have probably heard people say, Dr. Wallach is considered to be the co-founder or a co-founder of the science of epigenetics. So I looked up, and I already had read this book. I was aware of Dr. Lipton. He is a cell biologist, and he wrote a book in 2005, 10th anniversary, second edition, 2015, called The Biology of Belief. I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about his book and then about Dr. Wallach's book. And the third thing on here, which we can't get to today because it will take, you know, it's a full presentation. So I'll have to do that another time. But my research, what happened was there was this stallion who had this defect, and there's still, there is a discussion about whether that horse itself had the genetic mutation or only his offspring did. Because the people took tests and knew, but never divulged it, put it that way. But anyway, so these horses that were sired by this stallion could actually die from heart failure because of too much potassium in the blood, or they could have these strange things where they would sit down like a dog, and they would do what we call fasciculations. So again, that I've got to do at another time, but I wanted to put it up here because it's an example of a workaround. Whereas, you know, the other two, Dr. Wallach would look at an animal. I got all this stuff coming up in the talk. He'd look at an animal, maybe after it had died, find out what was missing through the necropsy, and then say, okay, if a bunch of animals with these symptoms have this same deficiency, then we know it's not genetics. Okay, so all of that, those of us that have followed this and are familiar with this book and Dr. Wallach's work, that's kind of where we're going to, you know, where we're coming from. Okay, this is the book, The Biology of Belief, second edition by Bruce Lipton, cell biologist. So in 1985, he basically said, my research offered incontrovertible proof that biology's most cherished tenets, in other words, what everybody believed regarding genetic determinism, that you were determined by your genes and couldn't fix it or change it, were fundamentally flawed. So that's the way he looks at this. And by the title of the book, you know, he is looking at beliefs, and his His whole book is really, you know, you are what you think, that kind of a concept. So I basically just put what he has in his chapters. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I have read most of the book a while ago, a few years ago, and it's amazing. I recommend people look at it if they're interested in it. But I'm not, you know, I'm not ready to go ahead and do a detailed thing about it. But look, he's learning from the cells in the Petri dishes and his smart students. What a concept. And then it's the environment stupid, right? Where the whole thing, the original saying was, it's the economy stupid when it comes to politics and things like that. So anyway, about belief and how it affects those things. And then also in his book, he's just going through this process. One thing I found fascinating in chapter 7, he talks about conscious parenting. Our parents genetic engineers, but he brings some really good research, scientific research in about, for instance, if parents were fighting in front of an unborn child, that child reacted differently. It would jerk, it would have changes in heart rate and some things like that. So he's looking at a lot of environmental things. People that are interested in that, again, beliefs control behavior and gene activity is his basic concept. Okay, and here we go to Dr. Wallach's Epigenetics book. And this is the 2014, I believe it's it's been reprinted a bunch of times. I don't think there's a second edition. 572 pages. And this is Dr. Wallach, his wife, Milan, and Gerhard Schrauzer, and he was a selenium researcher, very high up in the field. So this is, you know, the three of them writing this book together was a big deal. Okay, now there was an awards committee that the Biological Trace Elements Research Institute in December 2011 announced that Dr. Wallach had won the 2011 Klaus Schwarz Commemorative Medal. And this is what they said. From a historical perspective, Wallach is to be regarded as one of the first practitioners, if not founders, of epigenetics, the new research discipline that investigates, quote, heritable. In other words, did the genes change or did the genes not change? Alterations in gene expression caused by mechanisms other than DNA sequence. So there's a definition. There's one of them that we can look at. With the award of the Klaus Schwarz Commemorative Medal, Wallach is belatedly honored for a serendipitous epigenetic discovery that will be of benefit to many. So is that the definition that Marilyn, that you were using? Doesn't matter. I mean, if she's not available.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that the one?
Yes.
That was from the very beginning of the book. Okay. So, and again, that specifically says without a change in the DNA. So that does not count when the DNA itself gets changed rather than something downline as far as, you know, mRNA or protein or whatever. Okay. So why did Dr. Wallach write this book? I think we understand that. He had to make the point, and this is all my opinion, he had to make the point that we can't follow the gene theory. The gene theory, it has been found to be wrong, and we have to go on from it. We have to change it. So he starts out with the seeds and evolution of medical thinking. And he goes back and, you know, those of you who haven't read this book, if you're interested in all these things we do, it's fascinating because he really brings in a lot of history and you know, understanding as if you were in a college course. I mean, this could easily be a college textbook on this topic. So when people don't understand what's going on, they had no idea what germs were. They didn't know things could be so small that we couldn't see them and that they could affect us. And so they were influenced by things, and they called them evil spirits. And if you think an evil spirit is out there and you're told this is how it acts and this is what you have to do, and you know, you have rain dances and you just have all these things going on, And then from there, again, myths and things are what you get from the past, from your history, from your relatives, your tribe, whatever. And alchemy was the idea that you could change, people really wanted to try to change other elements into gold. That was the main one, but they wanted to be able to change one element to another. And they thought, well, why can't we? Why can't we change water to wine? Why can't we change copper to gold? Whatever. So that was a belief. Well, now we basically understand that those things are done with a chemical reaction, like a nuclear reaction is what it would take. And, so we've kind of set that aside. Now, we get into the witches and sorcerers and magic, because what those people did is they would have a way of, they knew that people believed in these myths and things. So they figured, okay, I'm going to be the one that does that. So they tried to, they were going to follow that and do it. And I love the way his chapter 4 is called Physicians, because again, that is a specific title that was put together for people who are trying to change these things. So it's very interesting. Again, I'm not going to go in huge detail. It's a very long book. But then we get to the age of vaccines and antibiotics. And this is where they start saying, okay, we know what germs are. We either have microscopes. They did at that point have microscopes, but we're able to see things moving around in a smaller size with the technology we have. And we have, and at least at a certain point, they had what's called Koch's postulates, Koch, and that was a person, a doctor. And he said, if something is an infectious disease, you have to be able to get it from a sick person, isolate it, put it into a well person, and the well person has to get sick. So that was the concept of Koch's postulates. And what that means is for bacteria and things of a certain size, things that are living organisms. We know what bacteria are. They're alive. So for something like that, Koch's postulates made sense. When we get to viruses, the way we understand them, they are only the genetic material, but they're not alive because they cannot reproduce without being in a host. And so therefore, there are some people out right now that have, I like to listen to a lot of different points of view. There are people out there right now that are saying, well, there are no viruses because you can't use Koch's postulates, because if you take a virus from a sick person, you have to grow it in tissue of something because it can't reproduce by itself. And if you grow it in tissue, then you haven't isolated it, which is true. And therefore you can't follow through and you can't use that particular process. But, and here's where I'm going to come back against that, a virus can be there. And if you inject a virus from one animal into another species, or actually even into the same species, what you did is you took it from where it was already infecting another body and you put it in and infected another body. And if that second body got sick with the same symptoms, you don't need Koch's postulates. Okay, so that's where that big thing is going. And it's going to be interesting to see how people finally come up with that. The other side of that, when the people that say that there are no viruses, what they're saying is that something that comes out of a cell that they can see with an electron microscope that is extremely small, something coming out of a cell that we might call a virus, they are saying it's what's called an exosome, which means maybe your body is just trying to get rid of something that it doesn't need, and that exosome is not actually a virus. It's not contagious. It's just something that we're getting rid of. And there's another theory with viruses that they may actually be a communication system. They're so small, they go through the air. They can literally get around the world, even without airplanes, and they may be an actual form of communication. So those things are all out there. We can think about those and think of, what do we think about it? However, like I said, it has been proven, as far as my understanding, because something that we would call a virus that has been photographed has been injected from one person to another, and then the second people got sick. Okay, so that's all out there. A real quick one on prions. I don't know how many people are familiar with prions, but there are multiple diseases. And I did mention here, Dr. Wallach did a great lecture talking about chronic wasting disease in deer. I am thinking it was a video. It may have only been audio. I think it was video though. And people that are interested in that should take a look at that because it was fascinating. Now, I believe
we did that on this show.
Yes, I think you did, as a matter of fact. So you guys can find it and maybe let people know. Because the thing is, people are killing the deer. We have to keep track every time we harvest a deer. We have to keep track of it. We have to be very careful when the deer are butchered because where the prions occur are in the central nervous system. And so, you've got to be really careful to get the meat from the deer without having brain or spinal fluid with it. And so, a butcher that didn't understand what's going on here could spread it theoretically and all these things. But the point being there, and Dr. Wallach's belief and understanding from what I understand from listening to him, is that prions are not contagious. Again, one deer cannot give it to another deer. One person cannot give it to another person. And I'm going to go through his what he's saying here. But this is an interesting quote. It's in the prions chapter of Epigenetics. And this is just kind of him saying, hey, in this book, I've been telling you guys why we have to change our beliefs sometimes. And his quote is, the earth is not flat. The sun does not rotate around the earth. And prions cannot be infectious if they cannot satisfy Koch's postulates. And I love the way he does this here because I just talked about it with viruses. Because he's looking at, this is what they can and can't do. And so he says, continuing to defend the theory that BSE and CJD are caused by and transmitted by prions is akin to defending the theory that life and disease are the result of spontaneous generation, which is what people used to think in the past. And I've got what BSE and CJD are. Bovine spongiform encephalitis, it means in a cow, a spongy looking inflammation of the brain. Okay, so they also called it mad cow disease. In people, it's called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It's been found in the brains of people. But what are prions actually? Originally, they thought they were misfolded proteins. Okay, so if you take a protein, you have the big, long, two-dimensional strand of the protein, and then you can fold it, and you have these little ionic bonds between different parts of the protein that will attach to each other, and you get a three-dimensional protein. And that's extremely important. A lot of our proteins need to be three-dimensional. And then for one more dimension, we call it a four-dimensional protein. Multiple proteins attach with those bonds, those ionic bonds, or, maybe a little stronger bonds, covalent bonds. And you have a four-dimensional protein. And classic examples of those are heme. You have iron, and then you have four molecules around it, and that becomes heme, which carries oxygen in your blood. And then the other one is in plants. And you have magnesium as the center, and then you have those four folded proteins, and you end up with, what did I just say? Okay, in plants. Everybody think of it. Or I will in a second. To do photosynthesis, okay, you need magnesium, instead of iron. I don't know why I'm blanking on that. Okay. So, okay, I don't want to go there yet. Okay, so the idea with prions was originally they're misfolded proteins. And what makes the most sense is that once one protein would misfold, then the one next to it would also misfold, because as these ions go back and forth, that's, that one ion next to the next protein will twist back and forth. Okay. But again, it's not contagious. It's not something that you can catch like a germ. And if people keep considering it to be like prions, to be like germs, then we have all these issues with cattle, butchering of cattle, and butchering of deer and things like that. So this is what Dr. Wallach is talking about in the prion channel. And sorry if that's been confusing, but it's one of those things. We change as we learn new information, we change. Okay, prions are from a copper deficiency. This is where this is leading. Because of the copper, those proteins can't fold correctly, and you can get this problem, and then it just goes on. And that's why a person who has this gets worse and worse and worse. And so I'm going to go from there to just talk about copper deficiency for a minute. Here we have a bunch of things that are caused by a copper deficiency. And you can look at these different pages that I put on this slide. On these pages, 434 and 435, he's got a big, long list, 2-page list of copper deficiency things. But since copper is required for, I think it said somewhere 400 enzymes, 400 different enzymes. I know zinc, they talk a lot about 200 different enzymes. But we've talked about things in the past with copper deficiency, and there are so many of them. It's the classic white, gray, or silver hair, because you need copper for the enzymes that make the collagen, and you need it for the color that's going to go into your hair, the melanin, pigment. I mean, it's needed for so many things. So your basic arthritis, I'll just list them here for people who are listening but not watching. So we have arthritis, white, gray, or silver hair. In sheep, they can have straight, what they call steely wool, and we don't want that, because when you're raising sheep, you want normal wool. And then wrinkles, connective tissue diseases, vitiligo, and this is where what Michael Jackson had, where he should have had a dark complexion, but he had spots, that more and more white spots. Ptosis is sagging. If you ever know some, maybe an elderly person, or maybe someone with a bad copper deficiency where the skin and everything sags, or you look at them and you see that their skin sags in different parts of the body. As we said, anemia, because it's involved in the formation of blood cells. Prions we've been talking about. These are blood vessel problems, spider veins, varicose veins, hemorrhoids, aneurysms, and hernias. It's actually involved in hypo and hyperthyroidism. So copper is needed for normal thyroid metabolism. Not enough. You can have either hyper or hypo. Ataxia, which is a weakness. And that he found in lambs, liver cirrhosis, just all these different things. So again, people would see these disorders or these things and think that they were looking for a gene, but no, they're really looking for a nutritional deficiency. Okay, and then we get to the part 3 of the book, and here we're going, the birth, development, and expression of the genetic theory of life, disease, and death. And I think most people have heard of Darwin's theory, and it's basically, Darwin is a kind of a controversial thing, because he actually talked about one type or one species being better than another. And he was kind of the father of eugenics, which was horrible. But his idea was that species change according to their environment. And I think we can all agree that species change according to their environment. But it's more in fits and spurts of things going on depending on environment. So his theory, again, controversial. People look at it one way or another, but I don't think any of us are gonna, believe in the whole eugenics part of it. So that said, and then Mendel was the monk who used different colors and shorter, tall peas, garden peas, and he would cross them and find out. He figured out the recessive and dominance of genes. So if we have
Okay, it looks like Dr. Judy has frozen for a few minutes. Let's give her a chance to come back. Hopefully she will. All right. All right. I don't know about you guys, but I'm finding this very fascinating, and I hope she comes back quickly. It looked like she got kicked out, and she is back with us. Let me find her.
Sorry, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. That happened on the last one, and
Dr. Judy,
it's random. Am I here?
You left us
I
for a
know.
few minutes. So
Yeah.
all right, I'm gonna just have you spotlighted and remove myself.
Okay.
Welcome
I'll
back.
go back. Yeah. I apologize, everybody. I live out in the middle of the country and it just randomly drops, literally. So I've been lucky that when I'm doing live presentations like this is only the second time it's happened. When I'm on a Zoom just watching or something, it happens every once in a while, but I honestly don't know how I can prevent it, but I do come right back on if possible. And
Yes.
we have sunny weather right now, so let's hope we can keep going. Okay. So I need to go back where I was talking about Darwin and then Mendel. Is that about where I was? Well, okay. Mendel was a monk who did botany research, and he was famous for using plants that were either short or tall, pea plants, that were either short or tall or different colors. And so he had white and red pea plants. And when he crossed them, he actually got some pink. Most of the time, you would have what you would call, it would either be one or the other. But he happened to have one that's called a codominant, where when they're together, they actually make a version of both. They make like an intermediary color. But anyway, he's the one that taught us about dominant genes. So if there are two possibilities, two alleles, when you cross them, you'll get to see one, but not the other. The one that you see is dominant, and then the other one is recessive. And if two recessives, if two parents have the same recessive, then you will see a new color that you didn't see in the parents. And that's the whole recessive thing. And that's also the reason why we don't inbreed within our animals. And most cultures have taboos on marrying close relatives, marrying, cousins, brothers, sisters, whatever, because if there happen to be traits that we both carry and the offspring would get them both, then we could end up with something bad, some kind of a deformity, that kind of thing. So that was Mendel figuring those things out. And so then people, once they understood that animals could change over time, Darwin, and that there were different options for colors and all these kinds of things, and that was Mendel, then they started the genetic transmission theory. So again, once we postulated what genes were, then we got, well, maybe genes are responsible for everything. Maybe everything that happens, it has to do with it. And Of course, that's the main theory we're trying to go against right now. Then along came Linus Pauling, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about him in the next slide. And the concept of the polymath is just someone who researches so many different topics and so many different things that they are able to pull those things together and have a very broad understanding of things. And both Linus Pauling and Dr. Wallach have been constantly called polymaths because they had that ability. So then we get to the double helix, and Watson and Crick were able to visualize and prove the double helical structure of DNA. And then from then we wanted to go and map the genome. So they did that with many different species of animals. And the big surprise there with mapping the genome was everybody figured, well, human beings are so complex. You know, they're so amazingly complex that if an earthworm has 20,000 chromosomes, humans must have millions, right? Well, guess what? When they did map the human genome, we don't have that many more than an earthworm. Oops. So there has to be something going on other than just those genes. The other interesting thing about genetics was that when they started to figure out what the different genes work for, so you have something wrong, something different with a person, and then you try to go in their genes and figure out where is there a change that caused that problem. That's what they're doing with mapping the gene, right? So they go in there, but they only figured out what about 10% of the genes were for. And obviously, you got to start somewhere, you know. But when they had 10% of the genes figured out, they called all the other 90% of the genes junk genes. Probably not. You just don't know what they are for yet. They're not junk. But again, this is science. This is the process, how things change. Now let's go and talk about Linus Pauling a little bit here. And then we'll go on with the book. Okay, and I used this before too, but nearly all disease can be traced to a nutritional deficiency. And this is a quote from Dr. Wallach's book, but I recommend that people interested in Linus Pauling, there's a great book that he wrote himself called How to Live Longer and Feel Better. And he wrote it in 1986. And the fascinating thing about that book is he doesn't just talk about vitamin C. He talks a lot like Dr. Wallach already. I mean, you know, he was born in 1901, but he's talking about essential nutrients and all kinds of this stuff. So people have figured it out, but did people flock behind Linus Pauling and follow his advice? No, because he was doing something new and different. So again, the lessons. Okay, Linus Pauling, and I put this in here to show kind of how this worked. Sickle cell anemia was discovered and named in the Black population. People with dark skin that lived along the equator. It was studied by Linus Pauling. He thought it was a molecular disease. In other words, he thought there was something to do with molecules in there, but he didn't really know what was going on with it. But he thought it was, everybody thinks it's genetic. And by the way, Black Gene Lies, Dr. Wallach's book, Black Gene Lies, I dug into there a little bit while I was going through to do this presentation. And again, that could be a textbook that everybody should read. It is literally a fascinating history and, you know, medical history, the whole thing. Anyway, along comes Joel Wallach, and he discovered sickle cell anemia in white-tailed deer. Well, that tells you that it's not genetic among human beings, right? It can't be. He eventually found out that it was caused by a selenium deficiency. So it's not genetically transmitted. So again, you'll hear people will go in and get tested. If they have a family history of sickle cell anemia, they'll go in and get tested and things. Now, once you have that sickle cell trait, that was inherited. Okay, I don't want to, that was inherited, but we can use nutrients now to make these people's lives a lot easier. And again, this is back to if the mother had all the nutrients before conception, the idea is they wouldn't get it. Okay, no one would get sickle cell anemia. It's just like all these other things. If the nutrients were there in the mother, we could prevent all these birth defects. Okay, so it's not genetically transmitted the way people thought. No, in other words, your genes rule, and if you're going to get it if your mother had it, blah blah blah. Okay, it's also called thalassemia in the white population. So it's not even it's not just the black population, and that's why Black Gene Lies was such a great book and history lesson there. The other thing about sickle cell, while I'm talking about it, is that the red blood cells shape weird. And I finally found out why that actually happens. The reason is that the sickle-shaped cells get stuck and clot together, and clogged capillaries are extremely painful. You can lose, fingers and things because of no circulation into the capillaries. But the reason it never left the population in places where there is malaria endemic is that the sickle shape of the cells confers an immunity, or at least partial immunity to malaria, because the malaria has to go into the red blood cells, and if they're sickle shaped, they're not big enough for it to go all the way through its life cycle and mature and hatch. Fascinating. So if you look at populations, usually if there's something that is bad, painful, can cause a lot of damage to the body, things like that, like sickle cell, eventually it would just come out of the population because no one's selecting for it. But when those people living there are not getting malaria and dying, like the people who don't have it, again, a fascinating population genetics type thing. Okay. So then we are going to the age of biochemistry, nutrition, and epigenetics. And here's where the concept of it can't be just the genes, there has to be environmental effects. And this is Dr. Wallach doing this. And then he talks about going to the Center for the Biology of Natural Systems and the 150-year update on the origin of species, where he goes back and talks about the things that Darwin talked about can't be right. And I got a little bit more detail on some of these. Okay, so the last chapters, he's just going more into epigenetics, called the book Nutrition, the Death of the Genetic Theory of Disease Transmission. And again, back to Darwin, what's going on with survival of species and things. But I've got a couple other just kind of ways to support what this whole thing is about. Cardiovascular disease, and this is from, this is kind of from the intro, towards the beginning of that book. Page 20. Our 20th and 21st century doctors have been saying all this stuff is genetic, especially cardiovascular disease. It's supposed to still be the #1 killer of people. And Dr. Wallach is saying, no, it's caused by nutritional deficiencies. And here are some cardiovascular disease types and the nutritional deficiencies that are a cause or that precipitate symptoms. Okay. In the arteries, people are always talking about inflammation. I love it. I go and listen to people talk everywhere you can imagine. And a lot of them start out with, well, all the causes of disease, all the problems, everything, all these issues that we have are all because of inflammation. I hear that all the time. And my question is, what causes the inflammation? Because inflammation is a normal process that's required to repair damaged tissue and things. So inflammation itself is not the bad guy. Everybody's trying to say inflammation is the bad guy. But what causes the inflammation, or too much, or prolonged inflammation, chronic inflammation, is, again, nutrient deficiencies. So that's my soapbox for that. Vitamin E, vitamin C, and selenium protect the walls of your arteries, the blood vessels, so that they don't leak, they don't break. The walls are strong, they don't break. And since they didn't spring a leak, they don't need to be plugged up by whatever fat happens to be circulating in the blood at the time. We have cholesterol circulating in our blood all the time if we're healthy, but we also have other types of fats going through our bodies from denatured fats. If our fats get too hot in the process of extracting them from a plant, for instance, corn oil gets extracted at 400 degrees, the fats are denatured, the body can't get rid of them. They're going through the blood or the lymph to get rid of them also, and we can have issues for that. So that's one of the things that is a big deal in cardiovascular disease. Now, when I mention these individual nutrients, keep in mind, we need all the 90 and we need them all the time. But one of those 90 is going to show up as missing first. And when that happens, you get a certain symptom. So that's why when we do talk about one symptom, that doesn't mean you're going to fix a coronary thrombosis with a specific omega-3 fatty acid. You may be missing 50 of the 90, but this is just the one that caused that problem right then, okay? So cardiomyopathy, selenium. Big news about cardiomyopathy in the news the last few years. Congestive heart failure, a thiamine deficiency, a B vitamin. We already did the coronary thrombosis. Aneurysms, one of the things we already talked about with copper. A lot of things cause copper. I remember as a horse person, one of the worst things that could ever happen is a mare has a foal, and the pressure or the stress of her pushing that foal out, she has an aneurysm and dies during foaling, and that's a copper deficiency. It's a really, it's a bad one. Okay, and then atrial fibrillation, and he goes through and talks about a bunch of other things, but basically he was talking about a calcium deficiency, among other things. It's your, the nerves, the vagus nerve coming through the small area in the back of your neck, coming down from the brain, that nerve comes down, and you get atrial fibrillation because that nerve is compressed because you don't have enough calcium, you built too much bone in that area, and, so that's what it is. And what do? They take your heart out of your chest, beat it with a paddle, do all these things, but it's not the heart that has a problem. It's the nerve telling the heart what to do. That's a famous story that Dr. Wallach tells all the time. Okay. Come on. Sorry. My computer's asking me what I want to do when I'm trying to change my slide. All right. And I wanted to throw a couple more of these in. These are the ones we're really familiar with if we've studied Dr. Wallach very much. I think there's an S. I didn't spell Xerxes right. I think there's an S in there. Okay. Cystic fibrosis, a horrific disease. They're still mostly talking about it being genetic, but non-related monkeys, when Dr. Wallach was there at the NASA Center where they raised the monkeys that were going to go, they were actually raised to go to space. But what he found is that a bunch of unrelated, you couldn't look at their bloodlines and go back, their pedigrees and go back for many generations, and they had different parents. So in other words, they weren't brother, sister, mother, father, that kind of thing. They developed the same symptoms of cystic fibrosis. And what this is in the lungs, a whole bunch of mucus is constantly being formed and you can't get rid of it. And children that have this had a short life expectancy, maybe 11, 12 years or something. It was very bad. So he discovered this in those monkeys. And because it was proven in both monkeys and people, he knew it wasn't genetics. So he started trying to figure out what it was. And sure enough, it was selenium. A lot of things are caused by a deficit of selenium. And of course, it was maternal nutrition. The mothers didn't have enough selenium. And so that function was lost, the ability to clear the lungs of that mucus. So that's the story of cystic fibrosis. And he lost his job and everything because people didn't want to believe it. It's really difficult to teach people, to convince people that they're wrong about something that they've believed. And here's just another list of congenital birth defects and some of the deficiencies they're caused by. This is from page, I think it's 285 in Epigenetics. Cerebral palsy in a llama, copper and zinc deficiency. Spina bifida in a monkey, folic acid and or zinc deficiency. Cleft pellets, we talked about the foxes before, where 2 parents had 10 foxes and they all had cleft pellets. That's imperfectly forming the head and the jaw of an animal because of lack of nutrients, and vitamin A and zinc he found in the foxes were deficient. And by changing those zoo foxes to a diet of dog food, commercial dog food, because commercial dog food is fortified with all the basic nutrients, he was able to fix that. Ventricular septal heart defect in the bottom of the heart, the 2 ventricles, the 2 chambers of the heart, the septal is what goes down the middle. And there's a defect there. He found it in a kangaroo. And vitamin A and zinc fixed that also. Okay, muscular dystrophy, the other huge one that Dr. Wallach talks a lot about, that they found the problem, but no one wanted to listen. He found it in hatchling ostriches, wild African sheep, vitamin E and selenium issue, and ruptured aneurysms, like I said, with the mare, pheasants, ostriches, gorillas, squirrel, monkeys, and it's a copper deficiency. So again, epigenetics, basically we're trying to figure out why it is that our genes don't tell us every single thing, and how things can be wrong at all the different stages. People are going to disagree a little bit on the definition, but as far as being able to help people with nutrition when there are people and animals, when there are problems with genetics, that's what it's all about. Okay, and I just have to mention, I know we're getting long here already, but I have to mention this, and I would like people who would be interested in doing this with me. What I would really like to do is, this is a fascinating PBS video. I believe it was 2015. It is basically 3-hour-long parts, but they have technology where they are looking inside the womb as human babies develop, and they go by week. And at each week, certain things, they have examples of people where something interesting happened at that time frame. And basically it tells us, if you're having an issue, it happened at week this, or if another issue, it happened at week that. Obviously, I can't talk about it like a book, because without the video, it's not going to make any sense. But what I want to do is I want to put a group together that wants to watch this as a series. And I need to find out what issues there would be with copyright. I need to make sure that I can show the video and talk about it with a group as a teacher and have that work. And I'm seriously hoping that works. Any of you that are curious enough can go, you can buy that video from PBS. You may be able to buy it other places, but it's absolutely fascinating. And it shows how some things that we see in nature, and in the last part of it, the last hour, they even call it epigenetics. One of the main things they talk about is that in a certain place, the babies who are born in the spring, where the moms had the best nutrition, there's a huge difference between the spring when there's good nutrition, and then the total drought, dry area otherwise. Babies born in the spring can live to be 100 to 120. And I think it's about 60 years. A group of researchers have been following these exact people. The ones that are born at the other times of the year when it's really dry, and those babies during development are not getting what they need. The mom is not getting the nutrients that the baby needs. And you see a bunch of these different changes, including half as long. They live to be 60 rather than 120. There are specific things that happen to them. That's just one of the fascinating things that they talk about in this. So just a thought. And I'm ready for questions.
Awesome. That was amazing, Dr. Judy.
Well, thank you.
Join you on screen. That was amazing. I had a couple, like, when you talked about the worm, I'm like, oh my gosh, really? But then when you talked about the cystic fibrosis or sickle cell, and that malaria couldn't get in there and you know, hatch, mature, like that's almost like a defense mechanism that the body created for people in that area. That's just
right. It's like a something happened. This is why there's diversity, and things can change. This is why there are blue eyes and brown eyes, and I mean, obviously, but yeah, that if an accident or a mistake or something like that doesn't happen, if all of us were exactly the same, then one thing could come along and it would wipe us all out, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Good.
Malaria would kill all of us if we all had sickle cell or didn't have sickle cell. That's all. And by the way, chlorophyll, I'm sorry, chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is green. It has magnesium in the center, and it is used for photosynthesis. I just could not think of chlorophyll. Marilyn, did you think of chlorophyll when you were putting that in there? Did that come to your mind? Or you were so busy typing it didn't?
It did not.
Oh,
it did
funny.
not. That's too funny.
Funny. Okay, go ahead, everybody.
Okay, well, real quick. ZZ Captain out there on YouTube, in YouTube land, like I like to call it. So whenever you see that, it's me. He says, hello there. He says, oh, where is it? So sorry. I'm in the wrong section because we put it all right here. He says, hi, CHN Nation. We love Dr. Judy Reynolds with the happy face and a thumbs up.
Thank you.
And he says, or they say, I think there are underrated polymaths in the world. And he also, or she also says, I take note with Darwin's caveat, it's not survival of the fittest. The original was that nature eliminates the weakest, or when you're at your weakest. And so I just wanted to say that. And then Marilyn has her hand up, and we have a few other hands up, and I will look for more questions. And we do have one asking about how do you join the video group, but I'm just assuming you will let us know and then we can post it. All right.
If you're interested, I would send an email into Daily with Doc right now, because if we get a bunch of interest in that, I have a feeling our Daily with Doc people, you know, a lot of our people are going to want to do this. So I don't think it'll be, you know, nobody will want to do it. But if anybody wants to, get your name in there so you don't forget.
Perfect. All right, Marilyn, go ahead.
I just want to say about, it's interesting you were talking about prions, because I have this client that does a lot of research. He's a little scientist, and he's saying, oh, I think there might not be viruses. There's really just prions. So I'm going to be sending him this your lecture from today and convince him, because now it is debunked, right? It is debunked. It is
well, again, you know, you hate to say something is settled in science, right?
Okay.
That's the whole thing. People are going to disagree. If I see a certain amount of proof of something, yeah, I'm going to say I'm pretty good. I don't have to go looking for more answers. But the whole thing here is that things change. We really believed a lot of these things in the past. You know, we believed the earth was the center of the universe. You know, we believed so many of these things, and then when we get more understanding, more knowledge, more technology is a big part of it. The telescope, the microscope, you know, when we start getting these kinds of things, that's how, when we start to be able to analyze blood, then we learn so many more things than we knew before that. So, yeah.
Well, you were trying to say that viruses are not visible. Have they been seen?
Yes.
So,
and I just so that this makes sense and why I even jumped in there, because I think you have to jump in there. If you want to say, in my humble opinion, if you want to say that viruses don't exist, okay, first of all, then every viral disease that anybody ever got never had it, blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of a, you know, if you're going to say something that most people believe exists, does not, then you got to have an alternate. You got to have something else. You gotta,
well, that's why he said it was the prions. See,
yeah. But again, how are you going to prove? You got to prove that it's prions. Not the best place to go for proof of viruses existing is Dr. Judy Reynolds. And she was a researcher, and she worked in the viral labs. But there are photos of specific viruses. And again, you know, that leads into a whole bunch of different things about transmission. But they have photos proving specific viruses. Now, there's another caveat as I come in here. There are some things that maybe were not or are not viruses. So just because maybe one thing wasn't a virus doesn't mean there aren't any viruses. And again, exosomes exist. In other words, all it is, if you took a picture of a cell and a little piece of the cell membrane, a little bud comes off and it goes out, there are pictures of those too. But the pictures that I think prove that viruses exist, or this particular virus exists, is that not only do they have the pictures, but they got them from a person that was sick, and that was injected into a healthy person, and then that person got sick, and then they still got the same pictures, right? And those things exist out there. Some people say, well, you know, again, if I have no horse in the race, no dog in the hunt, whatever you want to say on any of this, I love it when something new happens, but I'm not easily convinced. You know, I'm going to believe what I believe because I had my background. I had I've read and understood what I understand. But if you come in and you got an alternate, then I'm going to think about the alternate. But if you just come in and say no, or if you refuse to read the other person's proof or the other person's, you know, what they're saying about it, then it makes no logical sense. You know,
yeah, so you'd have to actually believe Judy's pictures and say, oh, yeah, it's valid. She didn't make them up. These are real. So another thing, belief comes into play. Yeah.
Right. Or anybody else. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of researchers out there. But I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
There's certain topics we can't talk much about, but okay.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you for your questions. All right. And Keely has her hand up, and then I have a question from Facebook.
Hi, Dr. Judy. How are you today?
Keely. I just want to tell you,
I'm great. I just want to tell you, you are an amazing, and absolutely blessed educator. I can't say enough about it. You are in your prime. And I'm so proud to listen to you. I have a couple of statements too. You know, like when people say autoimmune, because I listen to Dr. Mikovits all the time, and I listen to these labels. Sometimes I just sort of wonder if everything sort of gets thrown into that category of viruses because they don't have another pot in order to put it in. So some of the stuff gets mislabeled, and then they see it as a generalization instead of specifics.
Great point.
You know, so I
Yes.
always sort of stick that in the back of my head. The other thing is, if anybody's interested, Dr. Mikovits does have a weekly podcast that she does. And she also has her own website where she actually teaches from, and you can take a look at what her science is. And she also will give you PDFs if you really want to dig into the science, but you better get ready because you're going to have to study it hard.
She is, well, you know, you use the term polymath and things like that, but for people who don't know who she is, she has a photographic memory. She did biochemistry when there was no biochemistry. I mean, she did chemistry that has now become the science of biochemistry, but she can cite pathways that make your head spin, make my head spin. And I mean, you know, I have the biochemistry background and all that too, but she is an amazing person because she does have that photographic memory. So, but she's also very ethical. I mean, she stood up and said, I will not be unethical. And, you know, so, but she has books out that explain the whole thing. Her books are actually legal documents that explain the whole process. I've got them, I've read them. You know, they're amazing. So yes, and she does look, you can go out and look and find her. You know, I can get information. You probably can too. People contact you or me or somebody and we can help you find her stuff. So
Yeah,
if you're really a nerd and you really want to learn about chemistry, the other thing that's great about her is she also does work on helping people with nutritional solutions and things like that. So, I
yeah,
mean,
I always say that
she's sort of a
she takes deep
competitor.
dives.
She's sort of a
She,
competitor with us, but
yeah.
she's got the same basic theories. It's just that, you know, she has developed some other things and works with people that have developed other things. But, you know, nothing wrong with that either. So,
Judy takes Dr. Judy Mikovits takes taking a deep dive to a totally different level.
right. Yep.
I said no doubt about that. The other thing is that why is it, do you believe that when you take a look at this animal science and when all of that knowledge that you just covered for us in comparison to people, why do you think the medical community had dismissed it instead of accepting it, given the fact that this was done with animals first? It's just, I mean, other than the pharmaceutical thing, why do you think that's still a premise today?
Well, that's the whole thing that we're fighting, and it's because of the siloing. They separate us all into separate units of everything. And with me, I laugh all the time because people think I'm like a veterinarian. The animal science and veterinarian fields are completely separate. At Texas A&M, they had a veterinary school. We had access to all the medical school stuff. And I used to go to Baylor and we'd go back and forth with animal scientists, veterinarians, and medical people all the time. You know, you'd put them together. But they really pigeonhole people, and the more you learn, the more specific you get and the less general you are. So it's all a setup. That's why with Dr. Wallach learning it from the animals, you can't help but think, well, that's got to work for people too. But nobody does both. I
It's
mean,
crazy.
that it really is. And when, like, if you do degrees like I did, because the first one I did was actually the first one I went to a junior college for the first 2 years, and I was lucky enough to get in with some nursing students. They did a bunch of classes because they had a whole group of nursing students. So I was the only, not, I wasn't going to become a nurse, but but I took the class. So I took anatomy and physiology and all the biochemistries and chemistry and all this kind of stuff with a bunch of nurses. Then I went on to the bachelor's. I got a bachelor's of biology teaching. So basically, I learned the science of biology. But then when I went up the next level, I took animal science and got the next degree in animal science. So I kind of I threw out the plants, but I kept the, you know what I mean? I did the
Right.
biology was all of it. Then I did the animal science. Then I did the nutrition. So by doing it that way, I really got a broad background. It was interesting because some of the teachers there at Texas A&M, they were really worried. They'd never had a biology major come and try to do animal science and nutrition before. So they were worried that I might not have gotten all the stuff I needed to know in biology. So they had me TA the nutrition class and stuff like that, which was a great opportunity for me. You know, it was an extra opportunity for me. But then I managed to be one of the very few people in the horse program that ever got A's in both the first and second part of physiology. We did veterinary physiology. And, you know, these are all smart people. They all went and did a good job, but I was one of the few. I had a better understanding of that than most of the people there. Again, because I had already done that. You know, I had done the
Right.
anatomy and physiology. So anyway, it's because they separate us out. And here's another thing. We all need to work on this. We should have access free to all of these journals. Everybody should. Most people aren't going to care. Most people aren't going to want to do it. But in order for me to look at journals when I was working in industry, they paid for it all. And we could go get whatever journals we wanted to look at. And when I was at a university, they pay for it. And you can go look at them. But when you're an individual person, retired like I am or whatever, I can't even have access to those journals because I would have to pay hundreds of dollars for each one just to look up a topic here and there. Most of these things, like when I talk about the NRC nutrient requirements of cats and dogs or horses or whatever, those are government publications. They're paid for by our government. They should be free. Everybody should have access to all of these journals and all these things, and we don't. And that's a way of keeping us ignorant, you know, of us not understanding, not knowing, not having access to that information.
Wow.
But what happens is you got people in industry that have money. Okay. They're trying to sell you a product. They put together a conference. All the people's companies that they work for pay for them to go to that conference, right? So everybody does their little research project. They take it to the conference. They all present it, and it's all paid for. It's paid for by the companies. But then if you want to get it, you got to pay for it. Somebody else has to pay for it. You know, I mean, it's just we've got to figure out a way that people can have access to everything, because then we could look at it all and decide what makes sense and what doesn't. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great point. I never really thought of it that way. But what I just am sort of befuddled with is, how is it given that we've dealt with all this when they used animals in order to create the pharmaceutical drugs?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so they used animals, but they won't believe that what happens in animals actually impacts and is the same for human beings. It just seems like a walking contradiction all over the place.
Right. And I mean, each animal species has different reactions to different things. The vitamin C is a huge, great example because we can't make vitamin C. Neither can, you know, fruit bats and guinea pigs, and, you know, certain animals can't make their own vitamin C, and vitamin C is essential. We got to have it. So, in other words, to learn about vitamin C, the best way to learn about it is to watch a goat, because the sicker a goat gets, the more vitamin C it makes all by itself, and then it gets better. So that's how we find out how much we're going to need, you know. And one of the things that just came out recently is they're finally realizing that if you're really, really sick and dying, an IV of vitamin C might just get you through it. That might be all you need to survive. Septic shock, you know, some of these really bad hospital patients. And who talked about that many years ago? Linus Pauling. You know, so anyway.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your
Thank
view.
you. Thank you for the comments and the questions. It's, you know, the most fun, as far as I'm concerned, and the best part of this is when we have interactions. And I know I tend to do a bunch of slides and then we talk afterwards, but I really think that way you can listen to it and you can do it multiple times. But I really think the group concept and going through that movie and some other things that I want to do, and AJ and I have been trying to get something put together where we can do kind of group type stuff. So let's see if we can get that done. And anybody that's interested in that, just let it be known. Let us know.
Well, thank you for
Mine is just Dr. Judy Reynolds at gmail.com. DrJudyReynolds at gmail.com. And then in the subject line of the email, put DWD or Daily with Doc so that I know that you're not one of the people trying to spam me.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for all your efforts. We appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Keely. That was amazing, Dr. Judy. And Corey C. Here on Zoom says, thanks, Dr. Judy. I have the book Epigenetics. I was following along and taking more notes. Fascinating.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Good idea. And thank you for letting us know that. That's a great idea.
Thank you, Corey. And Nancy says restriction of knowledge equals control. Yes. So thank you so much, Dr. Judy. It was fantastic.
Thanks,
I always love when you're on because there's so much to learn and you always blow my mind. Always.
Thanks, Ruth Ellen. And you guys do such a great job. I mean, you're like my other family.
Awesome.
So.
Thank you. I feel honored that you feel that way. All right. So if I could get my co-host to come on with me, we'll exit or end the meeting. And I could listen to you forever, I swear. All right. So if you would like more information or have a question, email info, correct, AJ, at dailywithdoc.com. I'm sorry, I'm tongue-tied.
Questions.
No, for questions, yes. Questions at dailywithdoc.com. And then if you wanted to let us know that you were interested in Dr. Judy's lecture that she's talking about and spending time, so that would be info, correct? Or support. I think it's info at dailywithdoc.com. If you would like to talk to a co-host, if you'd like to talk to a certified holistic health coach, please call us at 855-949-3377. And again, I just need to say that this program was for educational purposes only and not meant to treat, diagnose, or cure any diseases or replace the care of your primary care physician. Dr. Judy, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't wait till you're on next. I will call you and we'll set something up. And then so on my screen, we have Mary, who is in here and she goes out to the different platforms. She also helps monitor the chat in here and brings questions in. And then we have Albert, who is the gatekeeper, and he is the one that you will talk to in the middle of the night, but he lets people in. And then if he sees something funny going on, he kicks you out. And then we love it. And then we have Sherry, who's part of our tech crew, and she helps get the stream out, the things I send her, and then she sends it out and she sets up, Facebook and Rumble and different things like that. And then we have Miss Speedy Fingers, Marilyn, who is doing dictation, looking things up. I don't know how you do that and keep the flow going at the same time. I think you're amazing. And then we have AJ, who's our digital marketing director, and he helps us get out to all the different platforms and sets a lot of things up for us so that we could get the message for Dr. Wallach and Dr. Judy and out there to the world. So thank you so much for what you do, AJ. Couldn't do it without you. And then I'm Ruth Ellen Sanchez. I'm the executive production manager. I'm a little tongue-tied. I think my mind was blown too much. Got to make fun of yourself, right? Anyway, I'm the executive production manager of Daily with Doc and Becca. And I'm just grateful that you all joined us today, and thanks for hanging in. We went a little long, but it was well worth it. So grateful. And again, a shout out to Becca Dukes. We love you. We miss you. Look forward to you when you come back. And always remember to be kind. Just be kind. You don't know what somebody's going through, and you don't know what kind of day they had or what they're going home to. So be kind. Thank you, everybody. It was great being here. Again, thank you, Dr. Judy. And we will see you tomorrow with Pharmacist Ben. See you then.
This program is for educational purposes only. The content is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, nor is it intended to take the place of your primary care physician. The statements in this program have not been evaluated by the FDA. Testimonials are shared as individual experiences of the individual. Results vary and may not be typical. We do not make any claims regarding health or income. As an empowered individual, you do have options available. We are honored to continue to share the teachings of a founding father of the science of epigenetics, Dr. Joel Wallach, Bachelor of Science in Plant and Soil Sciences, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, 4 postdoctorates in Pathology, Naturopathic Doctor.